Hello, everyone. My name is Mateusz Raczyński, and you are listening to the Aleph Zero Podcast. Today, we're back with another episode in which we'll catch up with idOS, the chain-agnostic identity layer in which Aleph Zero also plays a role and provides the ZK ID stack there. So, joining us will be Lluis Bardet, the CGO at Fractal ID, who will give us a crash course on what idOS is and its benefits for the webfree community. Hi, Lluis.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for having me in the podcast. Very happy to be here today.
Let's start maybe with what brought you from Fractal ID to launching idOS. What's the story there?
So, the idOS is a joint effort, as you said before, through several partners. It's something that we decided to build together with Fractal ID, Quill, Aleph Zero, Near, and Gnosis. And basically, I would call it the next evolution in the centralized identity. So at Fractal ID, we have been around since 2017. We have seen the different waves of decentralized identity. And we came to the conclusion that there was something that was missing in order to really have decentralized identity succeeding. We have seen a lot of money and a lot of companies in the space, but we haven't seen real adoption of decentralized identity. The partners of the idOS, we reached the conclusion that what we were missing is an identity layer. So a place where everyone could connect, where we could add the information in a very secure way from everyone, and then anyone could work as well to build applications from there. And that's the idOS today, what we call the identity layer of Web3.
So why do such identity layers matter for the future of Web3?
So I think that we need to get a little bit into the question of why does the centralized identity matter on the internet in general. The internet has been around now for like 30 years in a consumer level. And the interesting thing is that with digital identity, we never had self-sovereign management. What does that mean? It means that we really cannot manage as users our own data on the internet. We have that in the regular world. You have your passport that is issued by your government. You have it in your pocket or in your bag, and then you can share it with different parties. You decide to whom you're sharing it. You decide who has access to that data. However, on the internet, this doesn't exist. We have examples, and many examples are around social media, where essentially users don't own their data. Their data is closed behind walled gardens, and what happens to their data, with whom is shared, is not in the power of users. And that's what we really want to change. So we think that identity should be decentralized, should be owned by the users, and users should have the ability to choose who sees what and when. Is this idea of making identity available for only the people that you choose and only for the time that you decide to do that.
And do you think we can truly achieve such decentralized identity in Web3 when it seems that, giants like Google or Facebook, as you said, those are still walled gardens, but they own large parts of the digital lives of ours?
Yeah, well, I think, just to be clear, identity on the internet, so digital identity, will become decentralized inevitably. That's something that has happened. That's something that's human nature to eventually find ways to do stuff that is right. And that will happen not because it is cool to own your own data and to share your own data, but because actually it has a lot of benefits over the current solution today. Like, imagine that right now, and let's get into the use case of KYC. When you KYC with a provider, you are going through onboarding process. You then are waiting several hours until someone verifies that data. And that happens every time that you're dealing with an application that is on the side of financial services on the internet. If we need to do this every time that we onboard into an application, and we know when we heard several times that more regulation is coming to Web3, it's going to be impossible to deal with Web3. So essentially, we need to come up with a solution that doesn't require users to go through verification process every time and actually have that data stored, again, still in centralized servers. And we need to ask that KYC provider every time, hey, I want to share my data with this specific application. And if it's a different application, you need to, again, go through the whole process and again through the whole system. So I think that the main benefit and the reason why decentralized identity will become the standard for how we share digital identity, it is because of the reusability and interoperability element of that. It actually will improve a lot the UX for users. At the same time, there are other reasons as well. It is more secure. If you own your data and if you encrypt your data and secure your data with your own keys, there's no such a thing as data leaks where you can hack a database with 2 million people and then find information about all those. That's something that doesn't exist with Web3. For a lot of compliance and regulation is also a much better solution, because here the user owns and manages their data. It's not hosted by any company that owns that private identifiers. And I think that overall, that's what's going to make decentralized identity to become the standard and to progressively become more and more common.
I'm actually wondering, since you said, that users will be owning all their data, but of course, a lot will have to happen in terms of user education on how to custody your seed phrases and so on, right? What's your take on that? Because, probably when someone steals your seed phrase, they can also steal your identity, right?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And the thing is that that's a problem for Web3 as a whole, not for identity. It's what I call the price of decentralization is education, which means you need to be much better educated on how it works. But also, to be honest, we need to be much better at building systems that have a better user experience. And that's something that's key in the idOS as well. We don't want to go the way where users need to download another wallet or that they need to adopt any specific system. The idea is that the idOS goes where users are today with the systems that they have today. Ideally, in a few months from now, the idOS should feel like you just gave to your regular crypto wallet, in whatever ecosystem you are, the ability to share data as well. Now you can share tokens in a secure way, in a self-sovereign way. The idea is that you will be able to do the same with data. And maybe you will not even know that you're using the idOS behind.
Yeah, that would be perfect. And also you mentioned KYC as one of the first use cases for that, but what other verticals could benefit from digital identities? I know that you might say, Web3 ecosystem as a whole, but are there some specific use cases that come to your mind when we're talking about identity?
Yes. So there's something that we're not aware of, but according to several studies, it seems that identity, as the concept of identifying people and the concept of sharing your identity, directly impacts around 11% of the world's GDP, which means this is very big. And in the digital world, this doesn't exist today. There's not that much that we can use your identity for. Every time that there's a real use case for which you really need to show your identity, the only way that works is that you need to be there in person, or you need to go through one of these systems where essentially your data is not decentralized. Some company is taking it for you and then sharing it for you. I like to split use cases of identity, especially the digital world, in 3 different groups. The first one is civil resistance and social. So basically, just being able to prove on the internet that you are not a robot, that you're not an AI, but that you're a real human being. And this is something that definitely is interesting for a lot of the use cases in Web3, because they involve financial rewards. You could think of airdrops. You could think of decentralized governance as well, making sure that you prove that you are a human being that is actually making a decision on your own. And also for other use cases, like you put money into gaming and you're going to play to earn or play and earn. And you also want to make sure that nobody's taking advantage of your system. So that's definitely one of the big use cases. The second one that I see is financial services. And that you can call it KYC, but it's much more than that. It's actually how do we make it work so a user can share their data, which is in this case like sensitive data with private information on that, making sure that they are the ones that have full control about it, but also that we make sure that they are aligned with the regulations, like that they are aligned with any AML regulations that come up or any other financial regulations, etc., etc. That's quite challenging. And then there is a third group of identity or that identifiers, which is what I would call everything else. And that could be healthcare, it could be education, diplomas, etc., or it could be just government IDs. And we heard several governments that are already working on digital identity systems. Maybe just to share a little bit more about what do I think that will happen here, because that's also quite core on the ideology of the idOS. I do think that the civil resistance and social use cases are a proof of concept for digital identity and specifically for decentralized identity. We see many examples in Web3. However, there's no business here today. I haven't seen a single company that actually is making substantial business by focusing on civil resistance. The second example on financial services, that is what I think is going to be the first scalar area. We have a need today for having much better KYC systems, much better financial systems that are composable and touch on identity. there's this idea of a Web3 neobank where you have a stack of data and a stack of different applications as well that work with each other to build a solution that is much, much cheaper. And essentially anyone could be able to spin out a neobank and rely on the shared decentralized identity behind it at a fraction of the cost that it costs to launch a fintech today. And that is where we're really competing. For everything else around government IDs, healthcare, etc., I think we're still too early. I think it's going to happen, it's inevitable, but there's a lot of points around regulation, around what governments are doing, right? Because many governments are already working on it, but right now there's no market for this either that is substantially big. So I think that financial services, what really is going to make decentralized identity become a reality, make it jump, and actually people will be able to see the benefits of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And also, could you explain to us how would idOS then work from the tech perspective? Who's storing the data? How can I verify my credentials? And what's the idea for using them? Since I have them in the system.
Yes. So the idOS is, we call it the identity layer of Web3. We call it layer not because it's a kind of a keyword that became popular in the last months with all this blockchain modularity, but also because it's actually a layer for identity. Why a layer? Because you have funneling, so you have identity companies or identity onboardings that now can use the idOS for storing the credentials that they issue and also to define the access to those credentials. And on the other side, you can have any application. Take, for instance, any application in Web3, like many that are in the Aleph Zero ecosystem, that could simply then connect to this layer and have access to these credentials. So essentially, you could have a system where anyone can issue verifiable credentials and anyone can issue data against a user with their consent. And then the users can share that with also anyone that needs access to this data. And now this creates an ecosystem that we didn't have until now. We didn't have a decentralized identity system that was end-to-end, where everyone could rely on for simply the storage and the access management of the credentials. To be a little bit more specific, how it works, and I'm going to make an example with a simple person that could go to an application. So let's say that you go an application in the Aleph Zero ecosystem. I'm not going to say any name specifically, but this application, when you go there, you decide to connect your wallet. So you connect your wallet, and then you sign a message to be able to authenticate with your wallet. And all of a sudden, you see another pop-up in the wallet that says, this application wants you to share a KYC credential, for instance. And then there, you would see a message of what it means to share your data, and you can click accept there. In this case, let's say that you don't have actually a valid KYC credential. So in this case, the application can send you to now a verification journey. And that journey could be through every issuer, through any issuer that it wants. There will be at some point several issuers in the idOS. Let's say that in this case, it picks Fractal ID. So you could go through the onboarding journey through Fractal ID. You could follow the different steps of the KYC process. And then Fractal ID will ask to the user, hey, I'm going to drop a verifiable credential, which is an attestation that says that you have gone through my verification flow and that you actually comply with everything. So I'm going to put that credential into your idOS profile. Are you okay with that? Yes or no? And if you say yes to this, you can then also create your idOS profile where you store your data. When Fractal ID does that and puts a credential into your idOS profile, it is encrypted. So it is encrypted with your key pair, which means that even though Fractal ID are the ones that verified your information, the information when it gets added into your profile, it's only visible to you. It's not visible to Fractal ID anymore in this case. So you are the only one that actually has your information in your profile. Whenever you finish this, you can go back to the application, and the application then will ask for the credential. You can simply sign with your wallet and share that credential. What's happening here is that you are now decrypting that credential and encrypting it with the key pair of the receiving end. Now they are the ones that can see the data, but only them can see the data. This is just a basic example of how the flows work, how you can do it using your regular wallet. There's a lot of details and a lot of points that make it more complex to ensure that it's compliant, etc., etc. But in a high level, that's how the idOS works, and it can be game changer into how we interact with applications that need our identity data in order to be able to provide a service.
And what security measures are built into the platform?
Well, so you have multiple nodes into the idOS, right? So if we look at components, the idOS has two main components. What we call the decentralized node network, which is simply a bunch of node operators that are identified, that have signed also some agreement that says what they can and they cannot do with data, which host the data. They actually have the data from the users. As I said before, the data is encrypted with the user key pair. So they cannot see the content of the data, they just host the data. On the other side, you have the access management protocol, which the only thing that does is ensures that that data can be shared with applications across different blockchains, across different ecosystems. The data is always encrypted in the system. So as long as the user keeps their wallet without being hacked, that data cannot be accessed. The same that your tokens could be taken away from your wallet. So that's the level of security that we have there. There is we use different encryption flows for encrypting the data and for decrypting it and sharing it. But at the end of the day, it's a system where nobody can see the data other than the users.
Yeah, and what makes idOS chain agnostic? So how does it, bridge to different networks, and what are the plans, if they are such, for expanding the network of networks of other blockchains?
No, thanks for that. That's a very good question, and that's critical for the success of the idOS, but also for the success of the centralized identity. As I said, with Fractal ID, we have been around since 2017, and we saw many times the same mistake being done, which is the creation of a system or a blockchain for the centralized identity, where at the end of the day, the value proposition is, hey, you come here, you come to our system, or you adopt our standard, and you have identity solved. The reality is that there's no single system that worked, even though there were hundreds of millions of dollars that were invested on it. And the reason is because if every time that there's any transaction or any sharing of data, you need to go through a bridge, or you need to go through a system that you need to connect to that system. First of all, users don't want to go through the UX of that. And second of all, Web3 is not as interoperable as we would like to see today. There's a lot of effort that has been put of bridges of tokens, even though today, to move your tokens across ecosystems, like let's say across ecosystems that are not EVM, it's very hard. It's also very hard to move data across those different systems. So the decision that we made is to build the idOS in a way that instead of people having to come to the idOS would go where people are today. So where there's liquidity of users, let's say. That means, and that's why we build it on this way, that the access management protocol, it's a system that we can deploy across any blockchains. At the end of the day, what this system does, it simply checks that some data has been shared between two parties. So wallet X, that is a user, shares some data with wallet Y, that is another user or an application. And that's what gets recorded on the different blockchains. But at the end of the day, the information can only be accessed through the network of nodes. That's something that can be easily done through the SDK that we have and the smart contracts that we have built on the different blockchains. They also make sure that that is easy to happen. So then you don't need to go to the idOS network for anything other than to request data from it. That's something that can help us scale much faster than many of the other solutions.
Yeah, definitely. And, when we were talking about idOS, of course, the obvious other identity project that comes to my mind is the Worldcoin, and it was co-founded by Sam Altman. It raised like over 100 million in Series C, and I think it's already has over 1 million users. But the question is, maybe there are two questions. First is how idOS exactly differs from Worldcoin, apart from of course scanning your retina, but then how can you ensure that you tap into the same audience probably as Worldcoin does, but do it better? So how idOS is different from Worldcoin.
Thank you, Matt. This is a question that I get asked many times, and it's normal. I think that Worldcoin got a lot of attention, which is good because it brought attention back to identity. It's in fact a system that wants to be decentralized on the way that wants to move away from identity issued by governments. And it also wants to reach to users that maybe don't have a government identity, which is a fourth or one-fifth of the world's population. And I think that makes the project quite interesting. Is a project that raised a lot of funding, is a project that, of course, it's a lot in the spotlight. And I think it's overall an interesting endeavor. I think that a lot of the criticizing that Worldcoin gets, actually, it's reasonable. But I also think that what they're trying to do, it's quite interesting. And I think that they will get there. So why people are not so sure about Worldcoin is because of some of the decisions that they made. For instance, having these orbs made of metal, or the way that they went on the go-to-market strategy, going to underdeveloped countries and paying for scanning people's eyes, or the way that they launched their token with mechanisms that are known to be not the best for the market. But at the end of the day, my opinion is that they did some of this to get attention and to get buzz around the centralized identity and around the project. In fact, last week, they did present what they called this Worldcoin passport, and they are moving away a little bit from the orbs. So now you have different ways to prove that you are a human being. There's different applications as well connecting to the system. So it also shows that they are moving to more of a network rather than just solution that scans people's eyes and creates some sort of unique identifier of that. Let me also say here that there's something that's very important. People sometimes are afraid of this identity and that they scan their eye. But what's important here to understand is that what's scary is not that a company has a database of, I think now, 2.5 million unique iris or eyeballs. That is not something that's a big problem. What's a problem is that is a unique identifier of yourself, and it will be forever a unique identifier of yourself, which means any information that gets linked to that will be linkable to you forever. And right now, there's no way to unlink that. We don't know actually who has access to the data of the orbs, so we cannot see who exactly has access to that. We cannot see exactly who has access to their decentralized, so-called decentralized database, and we don't know what information is being linked to that today. And the thing is that something linked today will be, again, linkable to you for anyone that can see your iris in 40, 50 years from now. And that is why what's more scary and why we need to build systems that are fully open and how information is stored and who has access to it, like the idOS. To answer your second question, so how is the idOS different than Worldcoin? I would say it's mainly three things. So Worldcoin right now, it's only focused on what we call proof of human or proof of personhood, which means they created a unique identifier based on biometrics that says this is a unique human being. And it's hard to hack. So it's very hard that you could have two people in the system or two users that are actually the same person because the biometrics are different. So it's something that's hard to check. But that's what it is. It's only proof of personhood. That means it's not something that we can use for the real use case today, where we really need to find a better system, which is what I said before, financial use cases. For financial use cases, now you have a unique identifier, but we need to be able to add additional information to that. We need to add information like any information that would be around KYC, compliance and AML, et cetera. And we need to make sure that this information doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And that's something that the way it is today, Worldcoin cannot use today, or it cannot even be used to store that information in a compliant way according to GDPR and other financial regulations. The second point where it's different is that you cannot make sure that Worldcoin is probably decentralized today, and that it is fully self-sovereign. Because again, we don't know what happens in the orb. We don't know what happens fully in that database of data. With the idOS, all the data, it's encrypted with the user keys, which means that the user is the one that can see the data, can also see who they have shared the data with. They can revoke access to the data. The node system has also a mechanism, BFT mechanism, that makes sure that when you delete the data from one node, all the nodes need to delete the data. Otherwise, they get disconnected from the network. So that ability to know where your data is at all times and who has access to that, it's something that we cannot tell with Worldcoin today. The last thing is that even though Worldcoin is also moving this way, the idOS is composable by default. I was saying before, this is really an identity layer. Any issuer can issue credentials to the idOS. Any application can connect now to the idOS to ask the user to share their credentials, which means that we can leverage the composability elements of Web3 anyone can build on this. It's fully open source. You can build new applications to that. You can fix things that maybe are not so great today faster than in a system that is more closed, like Worldcoin today. So those I would say that are the biggest benefits of the idOS. Again, to be honest, the idOS is something that can work with Worldcoin at the same time. Worldcoin could take their credentials or the information that they have today from users and just use the idOS to store that information, for instance. And then they could still use their wallet and their system to connect that information into different parts. So at the end of the day, we are not fully comparable. It's just different layers of the centralized identity, and hopefully we can both live together in Web3.
Yeah, and from what you said, idOS also looks like really a huge project to build. I know all the parts have to be in the right place and move in the right direction. But I also wonder, how can people, or more like, Web3 builders, use idOS? Would it be building the apps on, specific chains such as Aleph Zero and, request data from idOS, or can you also build directly, within the idOS stack, just operating on those data?
Thank you for the question. First of all, it's important to understand that the idOS is very new. It literally launched 1 month ago in November, and it's live now in Near and in Ethereum. We are deploying currently on Aleph Zero and also into Gnosis, and it's going to be there in the next few months. What can you do today with the idOS is we have also launched our SDK. The SDK can be incorporated for any dApp. Essentially, what this SDK does is it allows any dApp to be able to ask users for access to their data within the idOS. And users can share that data by just signing a message with the wallet in the ecosystems where we are developed. So that's something that can happen. It's something that's permissionless. It's something that today doesn't have any cost, and anyone can use that. So if you are an application, you're interested in trying it out, you can just go to our documents, docs.idOS.network, and you will see how to integrate the SDK into your dApp. We also developed a dashboard. So this is, you can see in our website, or you can go to dashboard.idOS.network, where users now can see as well what credentials they have and who has access to those credentials. You can also try it out in the link that I just mentioned. In the future, there will be more use cases. So if you think that you can build critical parts for the idOS, let's say that you want to build, for instance, an analytics application on top of it, you can leverage that layer. So also it's something that you can do through the SDK. You would be able to ask any users for access to their data and then build additional services on top. So there's a lot that is going to be coming in the next months. And at the end of the day, it's an open source project where we are actively working across all those different partners to make sure that it grows. And if anyone thinks that they can add value to that or that they can use it for something, please feel free to reach to us. I'm happy to work together with you.
Yeah, and on the point that you said, there's much more coming in the next months. So what are the biggest things you're looking forward to in your roadmap?
So something that we said is that we wanted this product to feel like magic. And everyone says this in Web3, yet nobody builds something that feels like magic, or very, very little people succeed in that. So what we decided is that for the next 3 months now, we're really going to focus on making it feel really, really smooth. So our goal is literally that people don't know they are using the idOS, that applications integrated and people just now think that they, with their regular wallet, they think that they can share data, and that's great. And I think that would be a great success of it, actually, to just be on the back and make sure that now, as users, you can do more in Web3 while preserving your data, while making sure that nobody can take advantage of that, enabling new use cases for applications that require that data in order to function. So that's what we're focusing on the next 3 months. After that, and of course, we are also working on integrating with the ecosystems that we're already working with, which is Aleph Zero Gnosis and Near, to go further, to really find use cases to grow within the ecosystems, and mostly around financial services, as I mentioned before. only when we have a product that we think is great and where we have a solution for the ecosystems with which we're working today that we think is great, we're going to look into growing to other use cases. That could be any of the use cases I mentioned before. It could be new ecosystems, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we don't succeed by being in 500 ecosystems or by buying, sorry for the word, but 2 million users. We really succeed if people can use the solution today for the use cases that are needed today, which is mostly around financial services. So that's what we're looking to do. That's what we're excited to do. And hopefully we can get there. And in 1 year from now, we have many applications and many ecosystems using the idOS with a solution that really works for the use cases that are needed today.
And focusing on the perfect UX is definitely what Web3 needs here. So that's always music to my ears. But all right, I think that's all that I had for you today. Can you also maybe mention where people can, follow idOS updates on socials? Where can they connect with you?
Of course, yeah. So if you like and you think that the idOS is interesting, you can check more information. If you go to our website, idOS.network, you will find all these different areas. But you definitely want to check our docs, where you can see more information on how the system works. We spent a lot of time explaining why this system needs to be built the way that we did, and what does it mean as well from a legal point of view for dealing with private identifying data for financial use cases. We think that we really developed a solution that works and will work for what is needed today. So please check that out and challenge us if you think that you can help somewhere, or you think that you're not very convinced about some of the things. And also, of course, you can follow us in socials. We are the biggest on Twitter, so you can just check is idOS_network. And for sure, you're going to be seeing us if you are in any of the Web3 events in 2024. We are already planning to participate in all the major ones. And actually, we're going to be also together with the folks at Aleph Zero in many of those events. So just make sure to drop by, say hi. And if you think that this is interesting and you would like to work with us, just feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you for that. So yeah, that's a wrap. Thank you, Lluis, for joining us. Thanks everyone for tuning into this podcast episode, and see you in the next ones. Bye bye.